Hello, everybody. Welcome to the quarter century mark for the 706 podcast, which means, by rule, our president has become disinterested in us. I'll let that one sink in. Today we are actually discussing The Social Network in a rather curious turn of events for our 25th episode. We will be kind of doing the inverse. Today we'll be discussing I guess I'll be debating the flaws in the movie we watched rather than its merits. But I proposed this movie for consideration to, was it Connor or
me?
To Anthony. We're basically, this is kind of the negging episode, if you want to talk in terms of cringe internet language. So I guess I'm getting into the mood of the movie. But so this episode will kind of, I guess I'll be trying to facilitate the conversation that should be had, because I think this movie is I think it is definitely more or less in a sense. I guess I would say more, but this is not a term of endearment. It's more than the sum of its parts, and its parts are very much that those of a Lego set that has been marauded by 2 4-year-olds and a 7-year-old with a oral fixation. I'll just say that. But anyways, before we get any further, let me go around and allow my co-hosts to introduce themselves.
I'm Connor. It's nice to see you guys again.
Anthony.
And this is Tony. I gotta say, Kirk looks a little shook having just watched The Social Network. He looks like Donald Trump at the second presidential debate right after the pussy grabber tape dropped. Although we know how that ended, so I shouldn't give him the credit.
Yeah,
We're already comparing
you will win. You will win, but it'll be a horrifying war crime.
I see. Okay. Well, thank you for that comparison. That was really helpful for the conversation.
We'll delete it later.
Yeah. Actually, to the contrary, I'm not at all nervous or dreading my pick. I think this was an excellent pick. I think this movie came about at a very interesting time in America.
What year again?
2011.
I thought it was 2010. I don't know.
Well, it was nominated for the Oscar in 2011.
That's
so
right,
does that
the
mean
previous year.
it came out in 2010?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I thought they actually named it by the year that they were considering. But anyways, so 2010, Facebook was rapidly coming into its own. It was, I guess, beyond the stage of early adoption towards kind of the mainstream society. And it was becoming, it was developing its plurality, I guess. And I would say that, we look at personalized communication. We look at the iPhone, which came out, I believe, in 2008. So there's kind of this insulating. There's this, and I guess this speaks on culture. But let's. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go around and. Or whomever wishes to speak to the credit or the kind of the faults of the movie. I have a feeling, I'll just say this right now, that Tony will be ardently defending this film. I think Connor will kind of play the both sides a little bit, and I'm not sure about Anthony actually. So he's the free agent. But let's hear what people have to say.
Sure. Yeah. No. I came in liking this movie. I still do like it. I don't know that it's a perfect movie, really. I mean, there are things in it that, make me laugh for sure and make me, cringe a little bit. There are, moments that I'm not sure work. The opening scene, which is, really famous and, beloved, didn't really land for me this time. There was just something about, the rhythm of that dialogue that felt very unnatural, that didn't quite hit me. And I think it may have been just because it's the first scene. It took me a few minutes just to acclimate to sort of the Sorkin Fincher just rhythms that they're playing with throughout the film. Because by the end, I was thoroughly enjoying it. But there are individual scenes and moments that I think are a little bit cringeworthy, sort of the biopic-y. There's a scene where let's call it the this trope I will name the hit the road Jack trope, as in the film Ray, when a woman says to Ray, you know what, hit the road Jack. I don't want to see your face no more, no more, no more, no more. And he's like, whoa. He pulls out his piano and he starts banging out, Georgia. So I think that there's a scene that's literally just that in this movie, which is very weird. So yeah, and there's things I don't like, but and it does feel like it kind of feels its length by the end. We feel like we've been watching it for a while, but there's no real part that like really lacks, that really sinks. There's no part that I would like cut out necessarily. But no, I just love I love Sorkin. I love his writing. He's kind of easy to make fun of. He sort of has those rhythms that are very familiar and repetitive, but I'm just a sucker for his like casual brilliance at verbal ownage, and just every character in this movie is just owning each other all the time, which is just so fun, and I love that. And I think Kirk's going to talk shit about Eisenberg's performance, but I think he's really good, and I think Andrew Garfield's really good, and I think what's the other guy?
Justin Timberlake.
Yeah, I really like Justin Timberlake in this movie.
Armie Hammer on this one.
Oh, Armie Hammer is so good.
Him quite a bit, yeah.
Yeah, so I like this. Initially, I was kind of not sold on the premise of doing an episode on a movie like we didn't like necessarily. But now I'm kind of warming to it because my objective is different. My objective isn't to defend The Social Network as a good or great movie necessarily. I'm supposed to address Kirk's criticisms of it, which hopefully I'm able to do. We'll see, but I've been talking for a while, so let's just pass it around.
Anthony, you want to go ahead? Or?
Sure. So I picked this one because I was curious what Kirk's take would be. I'm looking back at the Oscar ceremony that Kirk brought up earlier. I'm looking at the other nominees, the year that the King's Speech won. And what's interesting to me is, outside of the actual winner of the King's Speech and maybe Winter's Bone, just because, the audience of that movie is pretty small and tiny. I can't imagine too many people are familiar with it. Is I think most people would be happy with almost any other movie nominated actually being the winner, whether it's Inception, Black Swan, and I know The Kids Are Alright has
Toy
quite
Story
the,
3, man.
Was that?
That was nominated, right?
That's not on here.
That's
Wikipedia,
2012, right?
May have been a different year. Never mind.
Yeah,
I thought it was up.
And The Kids Are Alright has quite its LGBTQ fan base. But anyway, so I say this because, I would have, on the outskirts, if looking back at when I first saw this movie in that year, I probably would have crowned The Social Network the obvious, what should be the winner. And I think generationally, historical importance, it certainly is going to be, significant upon looking back. This time, I actually, once again had the opposite take of Tony, is I thought the opening scene is actually the best part of the movie. I think it doesn't ever come back to the highs of the Rooney Mara, Jesse Eisenberg exchange. I think every word of dialogue in there is perfect. I think Rooney Mara is actually probably the greatest performance in the movie. And I think Andrew Garfield knocks it out of the park. I think he's superb. I think Justin Timberlake looks third rate by comparison. I think he's actually god-awful. And, I think, they really dropped the ball with that casting of Sean Parker. And, I have another number of other complaints, actually, with the movie upon seeing it this time. I think the pacing's good. I think a number of scenes are actually just kind of, I don't want to use the word indulgent, but they don't feel necessary. Like, they definitely could have been chopped on the editing floor, including the boat race scene.
Yeah,
which
that's
I think,
fair.
Yeah. And, I'll get into this. I'm curious what Kirk says. But, Connor?
Yeah, so, I came into this movie thinking, okay, maybe this was sort of a one-hit wonder. It just sort of tickled our sense of the importance of Facebook and that, we have a new modern story to tell, and this is a story about our time. Watching it, though, I was impressed by how much it actually still, I think, has remained relevant, even if the allure and sort of sexiness of Facebook, so to speak, has diminished somewhat. Now, still, the movie portrays Facebook as this incredibly sexy thing. There's an allure to it, absolutely. That has lost a little bit of its luster, but at the same time, I thought the way it drew its themes out, the concepts it was trying to address, I thought it did end up being actually a very interesting story and a very thematic story that still kind of holds up, even if Facebook is, we were just talking about Facebook just before we were actually talking about something we saw on Facebook just before we started this podcast, so it's still not as if it's irrelevant. But anyway, so that was kind of my challenge. That's what I thought the movie was going to fail at doing, and it didn't. So for that reason, I think I'm feeling pretty positive about it. But we can talk about the details later. Kirk?
Okay. Interesting perspectives. Tony. I think everyone was fair. There's a lot to take and kind of run with there, but I guess I should go over my own criticisms, kind of why I brought this movie forward. I guess just thinking back on this movie, I really just despised it. To me, it was, and this was the year that there were some other movies on that list. I think, was this before or after Moneyball? Was this, because I know it was back to back.
I don't know. Moneyball may have been the following year.
Okay, well, either way, we have our researchers on that. But those two movies for me, just it felt like I was like almost cryogenically frozen for the period of the movie, and I came out feeling absolutely the same way I had coming in, except my eyes were a little more tired, and I had some popcorn in my teeth. That's kind of my biggest gripe with this movie, is there is really no emotional arc to it whatsoever.
The following year.
It was the following year. Okay, so maybe I hold Moneyball to. I guess I give Jonah Hill the Jesse Eisenberg treatment as far as my criticism of his performance. But I really, as someone who attends to their emotions and the importance of them, and wants to feel when I'm consuming art, I really don't feel anything when I watch this movie. And I think the closest I come to feeling something is a sense of is engaging with that sense of betrayal that Andrew Garfield does excellently kind of put forth for us. But everything else is just like douchebaggery and just like this glorifying like Big Bang Theory style. Look at these nerds and watch them nerd around, and it's just kind of like we engage and we love this we kind of eat it up, the idea of overthrowing or inverting the social hierarchy and seeing this introvert, this kind of this what I would myopic be a good term? Maybe not. But this kind of this person who is a kind of miscreant, an outlier. He's ostracized.
He's a nerd.
Yeah, he's a nerd. But I'm trying to get at the idea that it's more than the technology. It's someone who doesn't belong.
He's introverted. He has the pent up kind of nerd anger.
Yeah,
which I think, yeah.
And so it's like, oh wow, look at him. Now he's calling the shots, and he has these twins that are super built, and
they're actually called white privilege as their names,
and they're trying to suck money. Okay,
sorry,
no, that's all right. So I guess thematically what I'm saying is that it's kind of like this, and I think maybe I use this term, but this like success porn, and it's. And for me, that's what stands out to me most. I can see the sociological benefits of investigating such a ubiquitous cultural artifact in Facebook, and why is that important? But I don't know if we kind of touch on it in the movie with there's parallels to their actual lives. I saw that your relationship status is single with Andrew Garfield. He gets in a fight with his girlfriend because he didn't update his relationship status on Facebook. At the end, Mark Zuckerberg asks, Rooney Mara to be friends. It's like kind of coming full circle with his past. So, there are parallels, but I don't know if that's totally fleshed out. For me, it's just the shine, the shimmer of a life that's of this endless possibility, this meritocracy that America wants us to kind of fucking mainline in a sense. And so for me, that's I think it's just a very cynical movie in that sense. It's like the idea that wealth equals fame equals sex, and they all are more important than any other quality. And so I don't know, but maybe that's, I'm sure actually, I won't say maybe, I'm sure that's a personal kind of viewpoint, but I feel like it's worth discussing the idea that this movie is kind of, it's insipid, it's lacking in that emotional flavor, and so I don't know, but let's go over to Connor.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that on the one hand, this movie does frustratingly and seemingly questionably glorify, and again, I use the word allure. There's something where, we see these party scenes. This is my, one of my big takeaways from the movie. If you're only paying attention to those moments, there is a lot of, it's glamorizing. It's glamorizing Zuckerberg and his ilk. In a big way, yes, in terms of the way it's shot. But then you also have the element of menace, the way the music plays. There's something dark going on. This partying is dark. It's sinister. At the same time, though, the movie is, I think, just a total takedown of Zuckerberg. Plain and simple.
100%.
I mean, it starts. It doesn't let him off at all. I mean, I think the plot of the movie, such as it's written, it kind of acquits Zuckerberg in a way. He's not totally to blame for what happened with Facebook, but in terms of the morality of the movie, he's totally the villain, and it's set up by Rooney Mara saying, "Listen, this is what's going to happen to you. You think that because you're a nerd, you've earned your sort of revenge on society, being able to overturn things, but really you're just the same kind of awful person." She doesn't say it in those words, but I thought that was a kind of interesting idea, and that was kind of an insight that you get, and then you see by the end of the movie that sort of her prophecy has come true, and that's when he's checking her Facebook. So I think it really is. It's a takedown, even if the movie engages in some glamorization, allure. I think, again, I use the word allure because it's teasing you. It's trying to get you interested in this, but I think it's trying to. It knows that allure is something sinister, not something to be embraced. And necessarily celebrated, but yeah.
Right. I think the parties are fun, fun in quotes, but they're always in the background. I mean, they're fun for everybody.
They're not very major, but
Mark Zuckerberg, who's actually shown throughout working, half the time, or sitting in his laptop or talking to a programmer. He never, despite the whole attempt at actually creating this to become something. He's never actually part of it because it's what's taking him away at the same time. Yeah. And the movie may function as a takedown, like you say, but I wonder if the lack of emotional response that Kirk has is because there's no character in the movie other than possibly Eduardo, and even then it's a type of everyman to allow us access into the frame of the landscape of programming, Facebook's development. Eduardo's betrayal at the end is the hardest hitting moment because he's the one character we sympathize with, whereas Sean Parker seems to be the villainous betrayer, getting
he's the devil
Mark
on the shoulder.
Mark Zuckerberg. He's the type that's perfectly set up from the beginning and never evolves beyond that. One of the problems I have with this, and the movie just wants us to accept, is one is I just don't understand why Eduardo and Mark Zuckerberg are friends at all. It's really curious.
Why anybody is friends with anybody else in this universe?
Well, right? Okay, let's ignore the fact that how did Mark Zuckerberg date Rooney Mara's character? But it's I don't understand. I could ignore that. But we get to the friendship is I don't need a full backstory of him helping them.
You'd understand if you went to Harvard, Anthony. You would understand this.
But constantly Eduardo's derided, made fun of, not listened to, and yet keeps coming back. And there's no sense of human connection between the two of them. Yeah. That's just my own personal problem.
No, I agree with 100%. I think that's the greatest failing of this movie, and I think that's why Kirk, he says he doesn't have that emotional connection to the movie. I think those scenes with Eduardo at the end, they're carried entirely by Andrew Garfield's performance. It would feel to me a lot more resonant if we'd had... See, if you're going to have two characters have a falling out, and that's the big dramatic crux or the tragic crux of your story, you have to have a beginning where there really are genuine friends. And he says, I'm your best friend, I'm your only friend, and he delivers that very well, but we never really get a scene at the beginning where we see their connection, or we see why they're friends. All we needed was one scene where they're just palling around in an organic, believable way.
Yeah, we only get the Fallout court moments.
And I think that Garfield and Eisenberg are both giving great performances, but there's no we never get that chemistry. We never get the sense they're never really interlocking. They're giving these really good performances in a vacuum
to begin with. I mean,
right. It seems like it's almost like a commentary on like this culture of like privilege in Harvard itself, that everyone's just trying to kind of propel themselves to success.
I think definitely this spoke to me just about Harvard. I was wondering how much of this was exaggerated, but it seemed like...
I think it's very exaggerated. From what I've heard and what people have described it, some people involved in it, they said this is such a absurd take on Harvard. But anyway, sorry, Kirk. I'm not using that to shoot down here.
But to your other point about it being pornographic or indulgent or whatever about the success that Zuckerberg enjoys, the thing that undercuts that for me is that we never really see him enjoy himself. His enjoyment is always this very petty, like mean-spirited success that's very short term, and he's left like no happier than he was at the start.
Well, just the last shot is Mark Zuckerberg, the youngest billionaire in the world, and you see him
just frowning,
really sad.
Yeah, and like
devastated face.
The most gleeful we see him is when he's going into that office building in his pajamas, and he shoots that like 12-year-old's grin at Sean Parker, and it's like pathetic. It's like really just sad and gross. And the only time with like the parties and stuff, we never really see Mark Zuckerberg participate. He doesn't even go to the last party. The only time we're really getting that is he gets like a blowjob in a bathroom stall, which is shot in such a way, it's not shot like in a sexy way at all. We don't see anything. Mm-hmm. And then it's immediately undercut because he sees Rooney Mara across the room and immediately reverts to this like needy nerd rage hatred.
That's very true.
Yeah, so it's there by no means is this like celebrating this guy or saying like, oh, this is like a cool way to be. It would be awesome. I mean, there's an element of the allure, I guess, of his success, which is you're always going to have in a movie like this, and frankly, you should have to some degree for it to be, honest. But I thought it struck the balance quite well for me.
I guess my point is like, if you would ask people, it's ironic because it's like, yeah, he's the, I get there's some irony there. He's the youngest billionaire while he's sad, but I don't know if the movie. I don't know if we can detach from our culture enough to see him as a tragic figure. I don't know if I can personally. I think the idea this all has happened so quickly. It would be one thing if the movie was made on like Andrew Rockefeller or something, or like you know what I mean, like Andrew Carnegie, John Rockefeller, one of those guys. Yeah. Like someone who is from another time, and we can kind of see them as this tragic figure. For me, like the idea, Mark Zuckerberg's story is still evolving, so that's kind of like the idea is like why close the party at 11, and it's and it's like he's doing these kind of altruistic, semi-political things now, and I guess that stuck with me in that you can't hold the movie accountable for something that's happened, but you kind of can because they're making a movie about a living figure. Right. Like at least Steve Jobs was dead when that movie Steve Jobs came out. Like that's different. Like
that's Kirk's quote. At least Steve Jobs was dead.
Seriously. But I mean, I think we could defend though, like to some extent, your argument that the party scenes are pornographic in that the capitalistic sense. Because like I could disagree with Tony because again I don't think Mark Zuckerberg is a character. There is so little emotion involved in that character that I can't find.
A callous, unemotional character.
But I can't find any.
About that.
Sure, and he's not part of the party, but you can't find any sense of then connection with them. Like he starts all this because he wants to be part of the crew, and then never actually partakes because he's so busy. I mean, Facebook itself is the metaphor for what he says is, trying to get laid, to seeing what people are up to, and that's what all he evolves his time into. But the party scenes themselves are still alluring. I mean, for everybody but Sean Parker at the end, and that's because he's doing illegal things with like 17-year-olds. But the party scenes before
21. They said.
Well, Tony has said that many a time. But
I think the movie succeeds really well at kind of capturing the spirit of this kind of nascent realm of social interaction, and in online, in internet, mass communication, in social media. Of course, that's the word. That's the term I'm looking for. And along that, attending that is, has to be very successful progenitors. And so we have those for us to kind of inspect. And I guess it's just that this movie, for me, I look at his portrayal of Mark Zuckerberg. I look at Jesse Eisenberg's portrayal, and I wonder, like, what do people really see the sadness so much? I see kind of the resentment, the bitterness, but all of his one-liners, like, he's the one that gets the last say. Like, he's the one that we're meant to see as clever, and
because he is clever. That's a part of his character.
Yeah, but
he's
as like someone who's like, he wins the conversation. Like he
But it doesn't matter. In
the only one who really puts him in his place, kind of, is Rooney Mara. Like, the only one, and that's at the beginning, and then that's like the impetus for him creating this amazing thing. So it's like, but I don't know. For me, it's like the movie gives him too much credit if we're supposed to see him as this tragic figure. Like, it's
he can't be just sad. He has to be sad and dumb. I don't understand.
No, I don't. It's not conveyed enough that he's sad. It's just like, I don't know. There's this dissonance there because there's this ultimate power, but we don't really see him ever express emotion to convey that he's sad. Like, maybe he's just unaware of.
He gets some great nonverbal moments, I think, in his performance. Like when the scene where it's at the what was it, the party with the, like, what was the theme with the Niagara Falls, the Caribbean party or whatever.
Yeah.
And I really like, this is the one scene where, like, there's an actual dynamic that makes sense to me between Eduardo and Zuckerberg, is when he says, "Hey, I got into the or I made the first cut for whatever. I don't know how it works. He made like the
second cut,
or what? He called back by the Phoenix Club or whatever. And Zuckerberg just takes this moment to process it, and it's so painfully clear that he's just like, he hates that his friend got this.
Yeah.
It's and I thought that was really well conveyed. And then obviously, from that point on, their friendship is essentially doomed. That's the one moment that, like, really made sense to me going forward.
Not when he said you probably are getting in because of the diversity issue.
Right, he had to give him, he had to just knee him in the ribs.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like he could have done anything, and Eduardo wouldn't have given a shit. Like, he just took it all on the
takes
chin.
all the abuse.
Yeah, I don't understand what he was getting from that relationship to begin with. Like
Eduardo?
Like Anthony said.
No, I agree. I agree with that.
What do you guys
100%.
think about
Money?
the boardroom scenes? Because the
Deposition?
the deposition scenes, yeah, because they're obviously they're scattered throughout, and it's kind of this way of breaking up the action, moving the plot forward, kind of either kind of recapping or kind of a preamble to the next scene in a way. But what do you guys think of those as kind of a plot device?
I don't know. I thought they were good. I thought the banter was good. I thought it was serviceable as a means of telling us the story. It was fun when it literally will cut just in between lines, between the deposition, and it allows them just to skip forward through the scene, to kind of skip little beats that you would expect people to have. So I thought it kind of gave them freedom. I think it's a little bit maybe corny, a little bit unnecessary. I don't know, but I thought it was good.
I think they're well acted. I think the boardroom scenes are the only times too we ever get a sort of cinematic criticism of the Mark Zuckerberg as being clever. I think quite often the lawyers are willing to cut through the cleverness of his speech and just telling him to speak straight.
Yeah,
I don't think it's enough to sustain the ending. But
I just want to say one thing related to Mark Zuckerberg and his kind of ownage in this movie, his ownage moments. Because I think a lot of the characters have ownage moments.
If you would have invented Facebook,
but
you would have
he gets the
invented
best
Facebook.
ones.
Yes,
clearly.
Yes, but Zuckerberg, I think that always, especially in the deposition scenes, is coming from this place, this unnecessary insecurity. And it's kind of like he protests, the lady that protests too much, it's like, there's a moment where they ask him about the Phoenix Club. He's like, of course, I could buy the Phoenix Club,
Yeah.
A little bit, so on the nose, as many things are in this movie, but I think it shows that even his ownage moments are from, it's his impotent rage.
Right.
Maybe it's just Fincher's brilliance, but I just don't think that it was subverted as clearly enough, because I think so many people would see this movie and see Mark Zuckerberg as like this hero and just kind of look at like the fact that, you know, why is that, you know, where's the sadness? He's a billionaire. He's the world's youngest billionaire.
That doesn't, I mean, that's so plainly ironic.
But that's from our perspective. Like, what I'm saying is,
right, when I turn upside down, his frown is a smile. That's
like, most
true.
people would be like, who cares about his, you know what I mean? Like, he's a billionaire.
You're doing this thing where it's like, well, other people are dumber than us, so they'll think he's good. Like, that doesn't matter.
Is that a thing?
That's totally a thing people say. We'll go ahead.
I'm not saying other people are dumber. I'm saying they might have different priorities.
But it's not the movie's fault that those people will take that away from it.
No, I know for a fact that people look at this movie as a great story, an inspiring story of the idea of the tech startup and the wunderkind, and they still do. They get that, okay, he's sad at the end. That's because Zuckerberg's a dick. It's not because there's something wrong with, you know, wanting to be rich. You know, it doesn't quite go that far, right? It mainly focuses on Zuckerberg being callous. And I think if you read between the lines, of course you see that if you're, like, the idea of the nerd, the takeover of the nerds of culture is not necessarily a win. It's actually, you know, it's not doesn't necessarily mean the good guys have won. Of course, I think it's trying to I think it is making that critique. I think several years before, a lot of us have been saying similar things and have had similar realizations about nerd culture and that kind of thing. But yeah, sorry, I forgot where I was going.
So it's a cynical sort of ending, like, to take in, as in, like, despite the potential sadness, he has all the money, he has the company. Sean Parker is able to call lawyers, and Mark Zuckerberg says he'll be able to take care of it. Mm-hmm. So just, you know, they're able to, whether the party's fun or not, keep it going if they want to.
Yeah, they can. Yeah.
And I mean, at the end of the day, the whole deposition that we spent 2 hours watching is a speed ticket. And the money is going to be going. We know for a fact that when this movie came out, the enrollment numbers of Facebook were much higher than, you know, 1 million. Mm-hmm. And advertising is coming in on and on.
Yeah.
I will say that there's another moment that I think underlies the kind of this tragedy of the ending is when he's getting the call from Sean Parker and he looks just so defeated after, like, the cops bust the party. He's like, this is what I've traded my one friend for. Like, it's just like the Sean Parker guy is not like a good friend. Like, this is what success is going to be like. Like, it's not and I think it really lingers on that. I will say, though, in your, not, I guess, defense about there are people who will be vindicated or who will be enthralled by this sort of thing, is there's definitely an element of that. Like, when he does say, I could buy the Phoenix Club. Like,
true.
I'm like, oh yeah, you bet he could.
Right.
And I love him just dunking on the Winklevoss twins.
Yeah, and we give him a thing to triumph over. We like, on the one hand, though, we know from the very beginning, Rooney Mara warns us that Zuckerberg may be a bad guy. We do get to see him triumph over something else that's not very pretty at all, and that is the exclusivity, the privilege of these kind of Harvard personified, the Winklevoss twins, privilege personified.
You know, never want to belong to a club that would have me for a member.
But they're very fun to root against. I won't take that away from the movie.
And just the whole movie is done in such an overdone way. I mean, there's such this you can hear the harpsichord playing in the background as
Trent Reznor
as the
score.
Winklevosses, you know, scheme, and just some of the things they say. Just, can you imagine anyone in this entire entire universe saying anything like this?
Yeah,
just throughout the movie, it's
kind of movie speak.
The absurd and the heightened, and it feels like I could imagine this happening 100 years ago or in a period piece, but not like this is like
it is a period piece.
It's a weird period. Yeah, it's a period piece of our time.
Yes.
That's so distorted and crazy that I do kind of love it. My favorite moment is the moment where what's his name? Divya, their friend, the coder who works with the Winklevoss twins, how he finds out about Facebook. He's on his laptop, on this white tablecloth, on his girlfriend's laptop, and they're on the laptop while they're watching like an a cappella performance. This is this ridiculous idea.
Well, he says they try to lampshade it. He's like, put your laptop away. It doesn't make sense to have a laptop here.
Anyway,
I love Facebook.
It's just this bizarre, and the fact they needed an a cappella group. It's like this, you know, this distorted vision.
I love that. Of people. That's so funny.
Of how people live and entertain themselves at this time. It's
every day at NYU.
Yeah.
I love the movie's kind of bemusement with the Ivy League culture. Sort of its slight remove from it. But what are you gonna say, Kirk?
No, I guess I wanted to. Well, I did think that the revelations in the movie, like he thinks of the relationship status. He runs through the snow in sandals, or at the beginning he runs back to his room and starts up Face Smash, or this, Divya is like stumbling out, and it's like these revelations are a little kind of
dick flopping everywhere.
Yeah, but I wanted to say about the boardroom, about the deposition scenes, that it felt a little lazy to me, because it's like it's looking in retrospect, and it's like it serves as a narration device, whereas they can't. Like, you're telling me that we can't see these events. Sometimes they overlap and they parallel, but oftentimes it's just like one character or another describing these thoughts, these interactions, and it's like it's just very kind of brought to us, and it seems very kind of unnatural.
You're saying they're like telling us and not showing us?
It's like,
is that what you're saying?
Well, like a deposition in and of itself. It's like examining, some past event or relationship, connection, whatever.
What is inherently bad about that? I
think the idea of using that as a plot device is very lazy. It's almost the same as if they had a narrator do it. Like
the voiceover.
Yeah, just a voice. Oh, just
Mark
some
Zuckerberg felt
random voice that's like, and Eduardo was Mark's only friend.
No.
I disagree, because the deposition scenes themselves have character and subtext and stuff in them. It's not like they're just like in there to shoehorn information. They're cinematic, and I like how they break up the pace of the story. They made it feel more engaging. I don't know. I wouldn't say it's lazy.
I would definitely disagree on the fact that they're cinematic. I think they're very stage play. I think there is quite a heavy amount of exposition thrown in there. I think they work. I think they're well acted. I think they're fine for what they are. I don't really need a movie that's all just the flashback of the creation of it. And I kind of like they're responsible for the few moments I think we have of Eduardo and Mark Zuckerberg's possible early friendship, when they look at each other and, do the oops moment. But I think they're okay. I
think it serves to kind of buttress this very flimsy story with kind of an uneven weight attached to different periods of the story. And
is it a flimsy story?
To me, it feels.
I find the story a little flimsy as well.
I don't know.
I think they did their damnedest.
They did their best
to make it feel like a story, but really, when you look at it,
I think, yeah. So I don't know. I just that was one criticism I had. I was like, oh, just show me it. Don't tell me about it in a deposition. So
wait, what's specific? Can you think of a specific anecdote that's told? Like what? Give an example of something you would have wanted to see.
Oh, what I would have wanted to see. I don't know. I guess just like him saying, oh, I don't know. They're just constantly,
because I felt like I saw everything I needed to see. There
kind of the idea of Mark kind of ducking the Winklevoss twins.
But that's just literally him typing an email. There's no way to make that, like, we can see him typing and hear voiceover. Dear Winklevosses, I don't have time to meet with you today. Send.
Yeah, that's
he didn't blow us off. I'm saying that's what that scene would be, though. They probably knew that when they were writing it.
Okay. There was a little more interaction than that, based on the idea
they
that
send
he was
like
chased
40
across
emails.
the quad. I don't know. What else was?
I think that's actually funnier when it's described to us personally. I thought that was quite funny.
Okay, well, either way, I don't think I'm alone in the general population of people who viewed this in saying that when you actually just tell us a story as opposed to enact it, try to make it mimetic. It just serves Sorkin, because his dialogue can be. It's just so kind of verbose. Right. It's just so fucking this purple prose that he just goes at, and he throws it at you, and it's like, I'm a writer, and I'm really fucking smart, and he's he says, what does he say? He says, one of the characters says, everything that comes out of your head isn't some revelation or something like that, and it was kind of I was thinking about that for a second, which obviously I'm guilty of, but I think Sorkin is as well in this movie. So
That felt kind of meta to me. Maybe I'm being too overly generous to the movie, but I felt like there was an element of self.
You mean Mars says that to Mark Zuckerberg, like it's a self-criticism of Sorkin as well?
or like kind of a wry.
I think it's
joke.
I think it's kind of like an inadvertent.
But it
kind
should be the criticism. That
Yeah, I think he's kind of guilty of it. But I guess I didn't really flesh out this deposition because I don't have specific examples, but I'm just thinking of kind of how we're
You mean in
describing,
general, you don't like how they're used.
we're
to
describing
describe
these
the
relationships in such kind of juridical manners, and it's just like it's so detached, and that I guess it turns back into it's a very chrome plated movie where when you kind of knock on it with a pinball hammer, it just falls apart for me. So I don't know.
I don't know about you guys, but I'd like to knock on this movie with my pinball hammer. You know what I'm saying?
Why don't we?
Yeah, we're 40 minutes in.
All right.
Let's
Why
just
don't we?
vote.
I mean, what
how
are we
does this
voting
work?
on though? That's the thing. Is like,
Well, Kirk, you're
I guess
exempt
it's
as
the-
always. You
Well,
can't
the
vote.
standard,
The
I guess,
nine-
is it part of
Is
the
it
7?
great?
The 9-0L.
706?
What's that?
the opposite. It's the mirror image. What movies don't belong.
So does
No,
this
but wait,
movie
are we?
now?
So can
well,
we-
know, I thought we
No.
voted as normal.
I know. Okay,
I
we'll
no,
vote as
I
well.
get
was
the
making a
idea
joke
because then
that-
it's not quite parallel. Because if it were parallel, it's like this is a movie that most people esteem. Let's say I don't know, that's arguable, but let's say
In general,
these
it's
are
an
movies
acclaimed
that most
movie.
people
Yes.
esteem,
Many
yes.
people back
and that
on
we're
that.
trying to almost take it out of its haul. We're knocking it off the mountain. Would we do that? That's if we vote yes.
So
we
it's
would
like-
do
I
that.
thought we were just saying if it gets in.
If it gets into the 7-6. Well, I think
Okay, but
because
I guess the question I'm posing is like from the perspective of this movie should probably by most people's standards be in that among that category.
Sure.
So is this movie good enough or bad enough to be exempt from it, or good
We'll
enough
just say, does the Social Network live up to the hype? Is it as good as everyone says it is?
Sure.
Or not? We can just say that.
no 706 voting?
This isn't
or-
that
yeah.
complicated.
Yeah.
Let's-
Yeah,
okay,
it's fine.
sure,
It doesn't
yes.
really-
I'll say yes.
Okay.
I think it does live up to the hype, despite being a little bit hokey. Still, the Fincher dialogue Sorkin dialogue does great a little bit. I think it has held up for these past couple of years, and it still tells a story that feels relevant and important. I'd say.
I don't think this is a bad movie. I think on the Ebert scale, I'd probably give it, out of 4, I'd probably give it 3 stars. I probably would have knocked it down quite a bit after, seeing it this time. I think the movie's fine. I think it will always be relevant just for simply looking back at the decade or, the latter half of the decade anyway. Is it Fincher's best? Definitely not. Is it near his best? I would say no as well. I would.
Is it any good at all? No.
Suck?
I don't think it belongs in the 706. I'm going to say no.
Oh.
Very nice.
Okay. Yeah, why'd you put me in this position, Anthony?
Well,
now my vote matters.
Finisher.
Yeah, I don't know, Kirk. I mean, I do like this movie, and I'm inclined to want to defend it from your greasy paws. But I will say that like it did go down a bit on this viewing. I don't think it's bulletproof by any means. I don't quite see why it is as acclaimed as it is. It was like the most critically acclaimed movie that year. It's like, why this and not something else? You know,
King's Speech.
yeah, why is it not the King's Speech? Of course, so yeah, I'll say sure. I'll say why not? Why not? I'll say yeah. I'll take it off Mount Rushmore and replace it with Inception any day. And just because, for the one reason, the one thing, Kirk, that persuaded me is just that I really think they botch in the early goings of the movie the relationship between Eduardo and Zuckerberg. I think if that were more established better. That would bring this movie up a tier, so I'll say I'll take it off Mount Rushmore.
Okay, fair enough. So we
Basically
have
2 thumbs down.
So it's November 9th, and the votes are tallied, and
yeah,
Kirk
exactly.
is president.
I'm president.
As I predicted.
Thank you, Pennsylvania. Thank you, Ohio.
Wisconsin.
Screw you, New York, New Jersey. Or no, wait. Oh, you're New York,
I
New
voted
Jersey.
no.
Yeah, so you guys are Pennsylvania, Ohio. All right.
Yeah.
Anyways.
You're Connecticut.
That
I was laughing when you said Fincher dialogue, because I just imagined David Fincher had these really shitty lines, and, it's like, and then you can say,
The placeholder.
you can say, well, fuck off, you idiot.
you friggin' nerd. Yeah. So,
I was giving you purple nurples when you were sipping Mountain Dew.
oh yeah, what the fuck? Yeah. So thank you. Let's in the tradition of our show, we are gonna now pick, or I actually specifically, this is where I wield some power. Until I
the one
never
area
get,
in his life where he wields any power.
This is the inmates are running the asylum here, and so they're gonna be my glorious co-hosts are gonna be hosting movies, kind of for my consideration. So let me hear it. Who wants to go first? Who is the least recent? I think
Connor.
Tony. It's such a wonderful.
I didn't know. I did the Beguiled after Tony, so it's
So
I
it's
guess
Connor.
it would be me. So
All right.
I say Tony should go first.
Okay.
Oh, I'm honored. Oh, man. I'm having a hard time picking. Okay. This is a movie I kind of didn't want to pick. It's a movie I'm floating between two right now. God damn it. All right, let's give someone else. Anyone else go.
No, what?
No.
Okay, fine. I'll pick one. Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't
So-
prepared this time.
All right, so I'll pick. This is a movie I pitched before. It's the first repeat pitch we've done.
Ooh.
I pitched it. I'm pitching it because I kind of didn't want to pitch this to Kirk. This isn't like a Kirk pick necessarily, but it is a movie that when I reviewed the movies I watched last year that were not new, it was my favorite, which is probably overhyping it. I don't know that it's a masterpiece, but it's a movie that appeals to me very much. This is Night Moves, which is a movie about eco-terrorists. And it doesn't, don't look up who's in it. It doesn't matter who's in it. They're just good actors all, I assure you. That's why I didn't want to pick this to Kirk.
Okay.
But
You pitched it to me first.
and the reason I said last time is none of you will like it is because the movie it reminds me of the most is Before the Neville Dozier Dead, which everyone here
Are you trying to get picked?
I'm telling you, this is a good movie, dude. Maybe I'm a masochist, but
Kelly Reichardt directed it.
Kelly Reichardt. We've never had a movie directed by a woman, so if you're a true ally, then pick my
Is that right?
Yeah, it's the only movie we've done that was directed by a woman.
Yeah.
We have one written by a woman.
Okay. Well, I didn't know there were such analytics done. But
Oh, you didn't know, huh?
yeah, I'm.
Anyway, it's a movie. I'll try to sell a little more. It's a movie that I think is just, as far as plot is concerned, it is really well plotted. It's incredibly tense and brutal, and it's a movie that explores kind of the theme of what it means to be committed to an ideology. And it's my favorite kind of thing where it takes a theme and just stretches it and pushes it as far as that will go and follows it to its logical ends. And I think it's something really cool and special. And yeah.
All right. Anthony?
So, unlike Tony, I don't, think of a strategy to pitch my movie. I kind of have one movie pop in my head, and I just got to ride it till that next episode and, hope it gets picked. I probably would have picked Connor, though, had I been able to pitch this movie for him, but this is my Village-style pick. It's a contrarian pick. I don't think the movie's a masterpiece at all. I think in many ways it's kind of bad. I think it's ambitious. I think its attempt to be a feminist film is as interesting as its unfemininity in it and its, horrid, prize of masculinity it displays. I think it's super fascinating, though. I think it's, maybe besides Scott Pilgrim, the movie that explains nerd and video game culture.
Wait, what? Have you said the name?
No,
Oh, okay.
It is 2011, I think, and it's directed by Zack Snyder. It is Sucker Punch.
snap.
The movie is about a young woman, or is it, named Baby Doll, who enters an institution by her governing dad, who is a threat to her sister and herself, and she enters this institution where she imagines fantasies of, brilliant action displays to escape the reality of a brothel. And, the movie goes from there. I don't know if any of you guys have seen it. I think Tony has. I think Connor has.
I've not. Okay. Well, anyways, go ahead.
Okay, my pick is 1998's Jinnah. This is a film about the founder of Pakistan. It's kind of, again, it's a little bit, you can compare it to the film Gandhi, but sort of from the other side of things. Right? It's about the independence and partition of India. Muhammad Ali Jinnah is played by Christopher Lee, the late great Christopher Lee. Yes, a case of whitewashing and acting, but nevertheless,
these are all incredibly problematic movies.
These are all loaded with issues.
They're all spiritually related.
So maybe you can comment on that. And no, this is a movie that I think will inspire debate. It's a movie, yes, about the founder of a nation, very controversial founder of a nation, that does, I think, attempt to exonerate Jinnah in the face of history and how we see the history of partition. Pretty heavy stuff, but I think it's very interesting. Yeah.
Huh. How do you spell that?
Jinnmah.
Okay. All right.
This guy's going to grad school.
No.
We forgot to say we have an Ivy Leaguer amongst our midst when we watch that.
That's true.
Yes, we do.
That's why he hates this movie.
Just say I'll be able to get on the Facebook very soon.
Yes.
No, but rebut, please.
Sure. Yeah. I gotta say for Anthony is like, I really don't want to watch Sucker Punch again. And like I'm like trying to be a good sport and I try to give everything a chance and I would love to have my mind change.
You just like helped his cause. Sorry.
I'm not gonna like be disingenuous to help my movie.
All right. Well, fair enough.
I'm sure I've done that before, but anyway.
Schadenfreude for Tony, and so it's good for me.
I know. He's gonna think about this later. I mean, yeah, Sucker Punch is a movie I just really don't want to watch again. And maybe it'll be interesting because it's kind of a bad movie that we could reevaluate. But I remember it very, very well, and it was like painful to watch, I gotta say. And I'm not like exaggerating. Like I really don't like that movie. Connor's movie sounds very interesting. I think it would be cool to watch. My worry is that it'll be a bit dry. My worry is it could be kind of a very interesting movie that like none of us will want to criticize, but that none of us will be particularly thrilled by. I think my movie, like it or not, you'll have a response to, which is the best I can do to defend it.
All right, look. I saw 20 minutes of Night Moves and wanted to see Open the Microwave and Sylvia Plath myself, okay?
I really did watch the microwave. I love how he sits on this. He always does this.
Quit Night Moves?
I watched 15 minutes of it after you pitched it to me the first time.
And what, you just couldn't
I love Kelly Reichardt, okay? I think Mink's Cut Off is one of the best films of the 2000s. I'll say that. I really don't feel like watching Night Moves. I'd rather watch the Arthur Penn version.
I could pitch this guy his own biopic.
Look, okay. Sucker Punch, it may have, some trouble for some of you, especially because it wants to point the finger at your sort of weird indulgences and...
That's what I didn't like about it, is I like to unquestionably just male gaze at women. Whenever a movie tries to subvert that, it just makes me really mad.
Alright, I think Tony rebutted for me.
Yeah.
Jeez. We'll let Connor
I don't know
go.
what else there is to say on that.
So yeah, to Tony's guess about the movie Jinnah. Yes, it's a historical drama, but I think you will not find it untouchable. It's a movie that's very touchable. It can very very easily be debated. Yes, there's some problem with you may not be as familiar with the history, that kind of thing. It helps know that kind of thing, but we can talk about that. But yeah, and as for Sucker Punch, I really didn't like Sucker Punch either. I'm kind of in the same boat with Tony, but not about the male gaze thing. I just thought its criticism was just like, it was another kind of it was kind of a pose rather than a real stance. However, I can see how Anthony could definitely change my mind about that on a second watching. So I will say that. As for Tony's, there's a certain curly-haired actor that I love in it. But yeah, anyway.
Who's that?
I'm interested in it. No one. Nobody.
Michael Pitt's.
Michael Pitt.
No, he's not.
Sorry, go ahead, Kirk. Make your choice.
I was thinking that because it's Funny Games, and I was getting those two confused. No. But anyways, have all of you seen everyone else's movies?
I haven't seen.
I've only seen Sucker Punch.
I've never even heard of Connors.
You haven't seen Connors, so nobody's seen Connors. Everyone's seen Anthony's.
Sucker Punch.
And Connor, have you seen Night Moves?
I have not seen.
So we basically haven't seen Night Moves.
Okay, all right, interesting. Well, let me just make sure I got the titles of these movies right. So
here we go.
So yours was a DIY by Bill Cosby called Night Moves.
reaching the major league in rape numbers is not easy. I know that. So, anyways, and Anthony's was about an alt-right prom engagement called Cuck or Punch, where you're offered punch with Rufalin in it and you have to turn it down. Yeah, exactly. And Connor's, I know it starred Sinbad, right? This is called Jinnah. It's the Sinbad genie movie, right? That's the one I'm thinking of. He was in it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
It's like we scripted those.
So okay. Well, I don't know. Honestly, not the most. There wasn't one that jumped out at me. In all honesty, which is all right. And I'm sure. See, this is what usually happens. You guys give me such shit, and then I go with Connor's because it's probably the one I'll want to watch, or I'll be happiest I've watched. But there's this thing about Tony being really upset with Sucker Punch, which is intriguing. But
Connor too.
I think we may never have another episode if we have to get Connor to come down here to watch Sucker Punch and Tony to sit here and watch it. So I don't know. Let me see. It's I'm curious about
the basis of the movies.
The basis of the movies. Night Moves. Tony, you did a good job in your initial pitch.
My best.
So you know what, Tony? Fuck it. I'll go for Tony.
Hell yeah,
Moves.
dude.
And
I'd say you won't regret it, but I cannot.
I think it's true that one way or another we're gonna have a response.
Yeah.
And so we're anticipating that. So good job. And now we can cross it off to never be touched again. The woman whatever role. So
Okay.
hopefully she's wearing a burqa somewhere. Anyways, I'm just kidding.
All right.
That's the shock humor.
Not cutting that. No way. That's staying in Columbia grad school.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. Well, anyways, before the ACLU comes knocking on our door, I will say that this has been a pleasure, and we will see you for our 26th episode sometime in the future. Thank you. Signing off, everybody. Last words.
See you, everybody.
Farewell.
That's our guest, Werner Herzog. He's back on the show. You may remember him from our episode on When Harry Met Sally, which I don't remember. Are you a fan of that film?
Terrible film. Just terrible.
Fair enough. But what I wanted to talk to you about today, Werner, is Adult Swim recently brought back a show that I know you've said some kind words about in the past, and I was just wondering what you thought of the reboot of Samurai Jack.
Samurai Jack, first of all, the old Samurai Jack is not a good cartoon.
Okay.
It is a great cartoon.
Okay.
Do you understand the distinction?
Certainly.
Good and great, Tony. Have you read Longinus?
I can't say that I have.
If you want to be in my film school, you must read Longinus. Longinus said, Homer's Iliad, not a good poem, but a great poem. So that is a compliment I am paying to Samurai Jack.
I understand. But you did mention it in the context that it was not quite as good as Totally Spies. If
Totally Spies is an excellent cartoon. It is not a great cartoon.
So wait, it's not as good as Samurai Jack?
Good and great are not the same. Do you understand? They are not the same
Okay, I think
thing.
so.
Good is not great does not mean very good.
It's a distinct.
Good does not mean less great. You understand?
Yeah, but okay, so if you were to...
If you read Longinus, to be in my film school,
okay.
you must read Longinus.
Wait. So...
I have a list of books.
So what I want to ask you, Werner, is if you were to redo your own reboot of Totally Spies for Adult Swim, what would that be like? In what way could they do that?
I was making the live-action film before the deal fell through. But yes, it would be reimagined. Not at all. It would be exactly the same. It would have the exact same runtime as the entire cartoon combined. That is how I watch it. I watch them back to back on DVD.
So you're saying this would be like a 20-hour feature film? Would be sort of what you would do with it?
But do you mean like Samurai Jack, that it would be a finishing of the story?
Sure. Yeah. How would you tie it up?
Totally Spies is finished. Totally Spies is a perfect narrative. I can do nothing with it except to retell it.
All right. Well, that's fair enough. But you were also in the news this week because you put out a statement on
about Trump.
Yes, our President Donald Trump, and a lot of people were expressing concern because it sounded sort of more positive than people assumed that it was going to be. Which maybe that's unfair.
I am not politically correct. You must understand that about me. I do not say simply what people want to hear. I say what I think. So, what did I say, Tony?
I don't have it in front of me, but you said he was very interesting and that he was an authentic person.
Yes, he is an innocent. He is an innocent of sorts. I personally voted for Ben Carson.
You brought him in?
No.
You mean in the primary?
Yes. Wait, he wasn't in the end, in the final election.
No,
anyway,
he wasn't. He didn't run.
Not important.
I think you had a different ballot than I did. Anyway, Verno, that's all the time we have. But thanks for coming. I hope you've kind of quelled the storm a little bit of the angry commenters that don't like Trump.
I do not care. Angry commenters, bring them on.
Well, in that case, I hope there are more. I hope you've pissed a lot of people off today. And good luck on your future endeavors.
Yes, please read Longinus if you want to be in my film school.